Thank you so much for joining our webinar. So I'm Adrienne McCants. I am SVP here at Uptiq, running across a lot of different departments. And James here is one of our product solutions engineers. And our focus today is really going to be on document AI. I have had so many people reach out to me saying, look, we are trying to build our own agents. It's really hard. We can't get things to be as reliable as we want. And we just keep getting stuck. And I think one of the places where people often get stuck is really just on these core documents. How do you read them reliably? How do you look at things and make sure that they're an enterprise grade, that they're fully secure? And so we're going to dig into a little bit of what we're doing. And then I think demos are the most fun always. So James is going to show a couple of options of what things are looking like, whether and we've got lots of different structures about how we can work with people, but hopefully we'll dig into it. So the first thing I see is documents hurting growth. I think every institution that's planning to lend more or do more next year with the same team that they have now, it's the document review, sorting, underwriting, grabbing all of that data. It's a huge part of what's slowing people down. In wealth, it can be dealing with alternative documents. In lending, it's dealing with all the loan packages. In other areas like fund administrators, it's reading everything through, having a document here, having a document there, making sure the signers are the same. It tends to be error prone and risky. A lot of things are still being hand keyed. Maybe you get a brokerage statement and you need to input some information into a CRM. And it can be expensive to scale. Currently there's a lot of sort of generic OCR vendors where it can be incredibly expensive as volume grows. And I think all of those contribute to accuracy often being close, but it not really being able to fully blend and execute the use case without somebody's eyes and hands on it. Versus what we can sort of do now is I think a lot of people ask me, oh, well, like, is the core of what you're doing OCR? But we're doing so much more than that because what we're applying on top of OCR is the AI extraction capabilities and most importantly, context. So we focus on financial services, which means that when you send us something like a brokerage statement, it has a full understanding of each of the terms in that document and what they mean. And so you can not only get the documents, scrape the data, extract the data, but we enable somebody to sit in a chat and also talk to those documents. Where is this? When you want to calculate X, calculate it for me. Tell me exactly where you're pulling from. In this example right here, tell me the risk score. Where are those numbers coming from? Show me that in the document. It is so much more of a full sort of comprehensive experience based on what somebody's looking for. And then we have the different ways we can do it. We can either do it where you are totally using your own platform. You just send the information to us. We send you back the extracted information. It can be, and it's fully MCP ready, so you can build AI agents on top of it. We can also build you UI if you want to go down that route. And so there's lots of different options of how we're sort of working with documents so that each use case sort of has the flow that's ideal. I sometimes get a question too on like, well, why don't we just go to a general model? And where I see that being an issue just comes back to knowledge, having the direct context of a financial services. How exactly do you calculate something so that you know it is always reliably correct? Same with understanding the strategy per document type. A tax form, for example, maybe there's lots of things that can scan it and extract the data, but there's not lots of things that can understand what that data is supposed to mean and whether or not that's accurate. And I think that's for us why we have this ability to do the potential fraud detections early, because we're building all of those different pieces into the broader context of what this item is to make sure, does all of this really look and feel and seem accurate? And when it's not, and I think this is also where it's really important, we've built the self-checking mechanisms to be able to go back and say, look, go look at that again, make sure what you pulled is truly right. And if it is, flag it for the user so that somebody has the ability to get eyes on something that's not right. So that's how we sort of see this making a big difference. Um, I can talk a little bit more about Uptiq more broadly. We have over 150 institutions that we use. We, for document AI, we can accurately and with full context read 150 different document types. And we can connect that to data feeds on origination, on KYC, on analysis, on specialty calculations, on Excel modeling, on all of the different pieces that people are working on. Um, and so maybe with that, let me hand it over to James.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adrian. I want to go ahead and show you guys our document AI product that Adrian has given us an overview on. At the end of the day, there's so many different use cases where this applies. What I'm going to show you today is one, underneath the hood, what's happening, what literally is occurring in our document AI, and we'll show you that live in a process. And I will also show you this in the essence of a small business lending use case. So where we see this incredibly valuable is in a couple different ways, but particularly for financial services industry, for lending, for banking, where we still are document intensive. How do I turn those documents into usable data for AI to use, for agents to use, for digital experiences, for bringing this all together in not only a way that it is able to process and build on top of, but also in a secure, reliable, and accurate fashion. And that is ultimately where this comes together. So what you're looking at here is a experience for our document AI where we're able to see the background. However, in many cases, and what you'll see an example of, is our clients actually use our integrations and our full API documents and webhooks to directly integrate this product into their existing workflows or existing solutions.
Hey, James, remind me, how many API integrations do we have?
So across our ecosystem, we have 200 plus of financial services based systems, think LOSs, cores, open banking systems, etc. So we have this built into our platform out of the box, and you can automatically connect to those systems with the appropriate keys. Those have been pre-built for you. Or if you just want to use this as a standalone solution and directly integrate, you have the full document and ability here to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with an example here. You see, I have the ability to select across hundreds of different types of documents, 1099s, driver's license, reports, business financial statements, brokerage statements, examples. For our case, I'm going to use a invoice. I think the reason I'm using an invoice is because it shows some of the capability of what we can do from both traditional structured documents, like a tax return, where it knows it's going to be in the same structure every time, as well as an invoice, where it's going to be different almost every single time. And it's able to understand and pick up that nuance and run that process. So I'm going to go ahead and upload my example invoice here. If I'd like to make any particular adjustments to how it's going to run its output, I can, but I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the extraction, and it is going to start its process. So if I go in, I can actually see in real time it running through its particular process. Ultimately, I'd see my live stream event where it's connected directly into the AI, made its initial review and is starting the process of running over the document and turning it into a usable extraction with the analysis on top of it. So in a moment, it will complete that review and we will be able to look through it.
It's funny on invoices, I've also seen people wanting us to um be able to like help create the invoices and then also checking that like the funds have come in. It's a slightly different use case, but I think it still also falls into that sort of document scope.
I think that that's a great use case where you think about a traditional OCR. One could probably only identify it's an invoice. It might not be trained to pick up the data appropriately. Two, with what you said of actually initiating action with that data, where should this be stored? Where could it be put in a flow? With that information, how do I take the next step? All of that is available with our document AI versus what would be a traditional out-of-the-box OCR. So as I was talking in took 53 seconds. We were able to go through and actually run the analysis of this document. So I have my view of my extracted data. I can obviously preview the document on the right here, and I can see all the information that has been directly pulled from this. I am looking at the pleasant overview, but if I want to see the JSON data, I can directly download that and I can actually see the raw JSON that has been created to be used from this extraction. What I can also see here are my confidence intervals of the fields. So if I would like to make any edits, for example, if it wasn't 100% certain, if I wanted to review, I have that ability as the human in the loop to make those adjustments for ultimately how we are going to use that data. And we don't shy away from letting you know the complete confidence of how it was extracted. Additionally, if I want to see exactly where on the document the data is coming from, it in integrated, it can show exactly where on the document the information is being pulled from and highlight that. This becomes particularly valuable when we're looking at, 100-page tax return and we need to jump to a different year, to a different value. It can quickly jump. The last thing here that I wanted to show you, which happened in the 50 seconds, are some of the controls and rules that it's actually looking at on the back end. This becomes critically important in understanding fraud and knowing the controls that you have as a part of your workflow. I'd say we see this in lending as well as with our wealth management clients as one of the number one things they use our document AI for. So as you can see here, there's a series of rules that we're actually running through on the document to verify the validity. As an example, were there any odd pixelations that have been done? Was there a watermark to show that this is not a real one? What it pulled up here was that this was created on Canva. Canva is a third-party production where you can create PDF statements. For a invoice, is that weird? Maybe not. Maybe it's a small producer and they're producing it with Canva. It's able to look at that metadata and show you that, hey, this failed because it was used by a third-party tool to produce it. Didn't come directly from QuickBooks, as an example. So
But if
there's
this
that
was
level.
Bank of America, might be a little iffy.
Exactly. So I am also going to show you an example of a bank statement, and you can see where that comes into play. But you see these many other rules that we're able to set based off the type of document that it's running and doing its analysis on. We do that both before and after the extraction is done with another set of rules. As an example, we have address consistency. Where was there a difference between the address that was listed um, and the zip code? So it noticed that this borrower's address, or excuse me, the invoice address on here showed it was Teterboro with a zip code. However, in reality, this zip code belongs to this address. Again, you can set rules around these things. Does this mean this is a valid document? Maybe, maybe not, but it's able to show you and you can express the way that you think about these on things that wouldn't be easy to catch by the eye. Some other things are like spelling and grammar, etc. So that was an example of the invoice.
I'm just thinking as you sort of show this one, I know that there's other teams that I've talked to where they show up and maybe they've got like a big backlog of stuff that they also need to get through. Can you also do large batching for big? I mean, I like to call it like the laundry basket where they sort of come over with their laundry basket of documents and I just need to like dump it in and have this, go through it, sort it, review it, put it in all the right folders. How do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. So obviously we looked at one, but you can see here and some of these you see it's a cloud batch. Is where in a process, as an example, 6 documents are going at the same time, and it's running this in a batch file versus the single one we just looked at. To Adrian's point, it'll do the same process across all of those in an async fashion. So if, as an example, if I'm onboarding 20 clients at a single time. I can upload their documentation and it will begin to run those reviews, the analysis, the extraction, and any of the actions that it needs to do with those data at a single point in time. And you don't have to sit there at the computer and continually monitor and type in. It will run that process on your behalf.
Yeah, and I think that you said there too is like such a good point for client onboarding because I think it's a really good example of having to not only extract all this data, but then fill out very precise forms in a reliable way that again, we are able to use our own extraction system to confirm and check those forms that are being filled out. And I think really just make sure that we're getting high accuracy on both of those sides.
Yeah, we see that again with a lot of different clients as one example. If I'm making loan documents, I'm making sure the exact name from the borrower matches the name on their Secretary of State, something like that, where you're running that validation as a part of this document AI. One last thing I wanted to show here is the chat functionality. Each time you upload a document or a series of documents, it actually turns it into what is called a RAG model, where you are allowed to query information about that document. So again, in the case, I uploaded, a 200-page tax return, and I really wanted to know, do they still have the same liabilities? I can query that, and it is going to bring in a response about that information. So every single document has that layer of intelligence behind it. Real quickly, before I show you this in a use case, I wanted to show you an example of a bank statement. You see that this one failed. There's a reason this one failed when it was uploaded, and there's a reason that it took a longer to process. And it actually shows some of those. So the actual extraction and metadata process took a couple seconds, similarly to what we saw from the data analysis, but the reconciliation of the fraud and the transactions is what ended up taking a very long time. And there's a particular reason for that. So I want to show you this is what it looks like. You think a standard uploaded bank statement from Wells Fargo looks pretty similar out of the box to what you might expect. Again, I see where the data has been pulled out. I can directly click and it will take me to where that information is. It's running some of that reviews, but there's a couple things that are happening that are unique. And if I go back to my checks here, I can see why it failed. First, the alignment. Oddly enough, there's a micro adjustment at where the line item is and where the actual figure is. So to the human eye, that'd be very difficult to see, but our system is able to show, yes, these figures are being adjusted. That is not a common practice for a Wells Fargo bank statement. Another thing, back to the Canva. This was again made on Canva. Would a producer of a bank statement make this on Canva? No, they wouldn't. It'd be produced by FIS. It would be produced by someone who is running a servicing or a digital banking instance. Those would not be flagged. It would be flagged in this case. It also went through the other of the series of detections as it went through its process. After it extracted the data and ran the results, it is also showing us another series of rules. Particularly one that I want to highlight is this exact this exact math logic. So it looked at what are the figures that we're actually getting across the 148 values, and each one of them end in these digits. Mathematically, that is very odd. It would not end in these digits if it were a real sample. How it would expect them to look more like this, so it has flagged it as an example. So that level of depth, those underlying things that as a human might be passed over. Our machine is running those particular checks, those validations. The document AI is running in the background on top of actually extracting this, putting it into fields, putting it into a usable JSON for you to use throughout any one of your workflows.
Hey, James, for people a little less technical, can
Yes.
you describe why? I mean, like we can transfer the data in multiple ways, right? Like, but why is JSON easier for people?
That's
Or why
traditionally how
is
it's
it
going to
easier?
be sent through the API. So if you're embedding this technology into, let's say you have a great website with a form and you collect documents as a part of that form on your website, you don't need to send them a link to this to upload those documents. It could say, John Smith Funding LLC, upload your documents here, upload it. That gets sent to us. The extracted data then gets sent back to you to complete that application. And that's what the JSON is ultimately doing is organizing that data in the appropriate fashion to be sent back to fill out that application as an example. I'm actually going to jump into that in practice here. So let's take a look at that. This is an example of our intake. We have a number of clients from small business, equipment finance, consumer lending, et cetera, that use this intake particularly as a part of driving their funnel for their lending. So I'm going to jump in here. I'm just going to say James, all to James at mailinator.com. And let's just do an equipment loan as an example. This is then going to jump me into my application. So I could fill this out manually, traditionally, or if I was a broker, I could email these into, I could put them into Google and I could email them over to you, and you and your team would have to sift through all this information, fill out an app, go through it. However, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload an ID. So I have an ID here, and I have just an overview of the credit ask. So some of the details about this credit ask, an ID, invoice, I'm going to send those in. And that is actually what's triggering the document AI you just saw. So now it's starting its process where it's classifying which one of these documents are associated with this, verifying the information that is on some of those checks that you saw, running those checks in the background. Is this in fact what I'm looking for? Running that extraction. So organizing all of the details that we just talked about. What can I pull off of that document? What do I need to do with that ID in the invoice? And then with that, it actually filled out our app here. So I have a complete fill of the business information, my address. Then if I move forward to the guarantor information, I have an overview. I didn't have a credit score on the ID. Can't fill that in. I'm going to put in the supplementary information. I have some of the ID information as well. And whatever it is able to extract and use is ultimately going to fill that out as a part of the process. So think about, go ahead, Adrian.
I was just gonna say, James, I feel like one of the things that I always really like about this, and I think anybody who has dealt with documents, uh, I think you know that there is like a 25% chance of whatever is labeled is like not actually that thing. And so I think that's also just like a really nice extra benefit of this is that it's really, I mean, we can embed in somebody's website so that when somebody uploads their whatever it is, it can just very immediately check and say, no, I'm sorry, that is not a 2024 tax return. Like you still need that. Instead of somebody needing to then take that document 4 hours later, then ping back the person and say, no, that wasn't the 2024 tax document, and then start the whole like terrible triangle over again.
Yeah, becomes incredibly valuable in the motion of the funnel and actually converting at different parts of that cycle. Obviously, I'm just showing you an example of intake. This document processing goes so much further. We do this from a credit analysis standpoint. We're extracting information off of P&Ls, balance sheets, tax returns, putting that into spreads, giving you both the validity of the information from the accuracy standpoint and the intelligence behind it to know how to spread, to know how to run those ratios to do it based off of the ultimate context that we've built these agents and this capability around, like you saw. So that is what I wanted to show you all today. I don't know, Adrian, anything else you wanted to make sure we went over, but I do want to open it up to questions that may be from the group or anyone on our team as well.
Yeah, I think let's open it up to questions. While we're kind of waiting for Annie to come in, I can say just a little bit about Uptiq. So I mentioned before we work with 150 financial institutions. That includes banks, credit unions, wealth firms, fund administrators, big catch-all groups, smaller groups. I think it's been really incredible to see the wide breadth of people that we're working with. Um, like we talked about, we do very deep real file classification, confidence scores, file tampering. I think one of the things that people really like about working with us is being able to have that picture in picture, to be able to see the document, see what was extracted directly, eyes on it, and also the feedback looping system that we're developing. And then we can run lots of different outputs, and whether that is going straight to somebody or whether that's connecting, comparing some data that was received across like what is on the internet, uh, comparing appraisals, comparing valuation, comparing outside documents, grabbing all this stuff, throwing it into an Excel model that you typically have. We've really just seen such a huge breadth of use cases.
Yeah. Looks like we have a question in the chat. It says, what does an evaluation actually look like? Can we run our own documents through it before committing? If I break that down, it sounds like two particular things. So I'll try to answer this as thoroughly as possible. From the first part, the amount of human in the loop from the evaluation standpoint that you like is completely configurable. If you would like, as an example, the human to approve that classification before it moves forward to the next step, you absolutely can have someone, like Adrian said, that picture in a picture. Say, here's my document, here's the extraction, this looks good. You can go ahead and move forward. So from that evaluation perspective, you can upload what you want, you can look at it, you can absolutely do that. The other option here too is you can use our system to run its confidence and you can set a standard on that confidence of the review of the evaluation. So we have a process where we certify our documentation. We're certified across over 100 financial services based documents, And that goes through a rigorous process of not only training and on real documentation, synthetic documentation, as well as our knowledge team doing a manual review to know this is in fact what you should be looking for. This is in fact correct. And it goes through that depth of certification. So when we certify a document, we give it to you at a point where it's gone through a very deep evaluation process so you can expect accuracy almost every time. I hope that answers your question.
All right, guys, I know that there's one thing the team wanted me to say, which is I think that we're going to do a survey for everybody as well. So we may want to put that up right now. Oh, nice. Here it is. Little Google form. Well, if everybody could fill that out, that'd be incredibly useful for us. And James and I are around. We'd love to talk
Thank
more.
you so much for your time. I hope that you could envision how you can use documented AI. Feel free to reach out to any of us, and we're happy to show you more or answer any more questions.
Thanks, everyone.